So what you just heard was my lovely children singing for you what's called the quadratic formula. When a quadratic equation doesn't factor nicely, we can use the quadratic formula to solve the equation anyway. So as a reminder, standard form, we have y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And the quadratic formula, how you can solve for x if it doesn't factor, is x equals, and the song goes negative b, but it's really the opposite of b. Just like that axis of symmetry that we looked at, x equals the opposite of b plus or minus. Remember, a parabola typically hits the x-axis twice, so we get two answers, a plus square root or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And as you can see, I have the formula color-coded for you, so you can easily see where each piece of information goes. And just like yesterday, our essential question is, how do you solve a quadratic equation? Starting off, our first equation, if we were going to try and factor this, we would have to think about numbers that multiply to 3 and add to -5. There are no numbers that do that, so to solve the equation, we have x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Remember, standard form, a is the coefficient of x squared, which in our case is 1. b is the coefficient of x, which in our case is -5. And c is the constant, in our case, 3. Once you identify all of those pieces, you just substitute them into the formula. X equals, notice our b is negative, so the opposite of -5 is +5, plus or minus the square root of b squared. I drop any negative signs that might be on b because once you square it, it becomes positive. And throwing that negative sign in there could mess you up with your calculations. Minus 4 is part of the formula. There will always be a 4 in there. Times a, our a was 1, times c, our c is 3. All over, make sure that division bar goes all the way to the beginning, not just under the radical. 2 is another part of the formula. You will always have a 2 in the denominator. 2a, a was 1. So we're going to start simplifying this. We have 5 plus or minus the square root. 5 squared is 25. 4 times 1 is 4 times 3 is 12. All over 2 times 1. Simplifying under the radical. 25 minus 12 is 13. And 13 does not have any perfect square factors, so we cannot simplify what's under the radical any further. So that's our answer. The quadratic formula does not work unless you have your equation equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract that 4x and I'm going to put it in the right order. It has to go in the middle and our constant has to go on the end. So now we can identify our a, the coefficient of x squared. We have a negative sign, which means we're multiplying by -1. b, the coefficient of x, is -4. And c, our constant, is 8. So x equals opposite of b. b is -4, so the opposite of that is 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Simplifying what's under the radical, 4 squared is 16. -4 times -1 is +4 times 8 is +32. All over 2 times -1 is -2. Adding those numbers under the radical, 16 plus 32 gives us 48, all over -2. Let's take a look at that one more time. Again, we have to get this equal to 0, so I'm going to add that 2 to both sides, and I'm going to put it into standard form So we have our x squared term, our x term, and our constant in order. Our a is 3, coefficient of x squared, coefficient of x, b is 6, and our constant is 2. So our quadratic formula, x equals the opposite of b, so this time we have a negative, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 is part of that formula, times a times c, all over 2 times a. Simplifying what's under the radical, 6 squared is 36, 4 times 3 is 12, times 2 is 24, all over 2 times 3 is 6. Subtracting that 36 and 24, we get 12. And you have one U-Try question today.